Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. I've never worn this before, so my pockets are still sewed up. There we go. I like my pockets to be functional. All right. We are live. Whitley's back there saying, yes, you are live. We welcome you. We are thankful for those who've joined us by way of YouTube. We have, the preacher went a little long today, but we did start a little late. But nevertheless, you know, we always want the fellowship. And the fellowship and the camaraderie and the love that we have for one another is part of the reason that we assemble on Sunday, because we want to be together and do with one another and encourage each other. But we're in Hebrews chapter 13. We are going to try to consider the first 7 verses as we think about being healthy in an unhealthy age. And we're talking spiritually. Now, you know, I wouldn't be the one to give the discourse about being healthy, right? Maybe in the future, but as of right now. But spiritually speaking, we're going to talk about that as a church. In Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 1, Paul begins by saying, let brotherly love continue. What's important about this? What's important about brotherly love going on?
Relationships in the church.
Relationships, extremely, extremely important. What happens when there is an absence of brotherly love being practiced? It's disaster. When brotherly love ceases to be practiced within the church to one another, disaster happens. That's what happens. Tragedy strikes. Brethren start talking about each other. They start going behind the other one's backs. Is that practicing brotherly love? Absolutely not. And what does that lead to? Catastrophe. That's exactly what it leads to. Catastrophe. He says, let brotherly love continue. Now there's multiple kinds of love that we find in the New Testament, right? What are some of the loves that we find in the New Testament? Agape love, which is the kind of love that God gives to us and that we strive to give. It's the selfless love. It's the love that of no matter what circumstance. That's a difficult love, right? What's another kind of love that we find? Phileo, or the Philadelphia. That is the phileo love is the brotherly love. That's the love that he mentions here in this text and all over the New Testament.
I don't recall. It's been a while since I looked at it in Greek. The many trips that Jesus made to Mary and Martha's house and Lazarus, but that was a storge relationship. It was
familial.
Yeah, it was very comfortable.
Yeah.
Go and relax.
Yeah, so the storge love is a love that you would see like a parent to a child, a familial, a very comfortable, but it is not. There's another love, eros, it's the erotic, it's the sexual love. It's the love that is to be found within the marriage bond. And so those are the 4 loves that we find in the New Testament. The one mentioned here is the phileo, the Philadelphia, the brotherly kind of friendship.
It's actually a technicality, but eros itself is not mentioned. Concepts, but not.
Right, yes. But the Greek word does exist to describe that kind of love. In 1 Peter chapter 1, in verse number 22, Peter writes, seeing you have purified your souls in obeying the truth by the Spirit unto unfeigned love of the brethren, See that you what? Love one another with a pure heart fervently. We are to let brotherly love continue. And when we fail to practice brotherly love, we are not doing what God would have us to do. We're not being who God would have us to be. And so we need to let that kind of love continue. In 2 Peter chapter 1 and verse number 7, let me get to it. And godliness, and to godliness, he said, brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness, charity or love. These are the principles that we are to add to. These are the Christian virtues. And so we are to add brotherly kindness and love. And so that's who we should be. Love should be a defining factor. It should be I'm searching for the word, help me, a characteristic, if you will, of who we are. Those people at the Eastside Church of Christ in Morganton are a loving people, are a friendly group, and that's what we want to be. He says in verse 2, be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares. This is an interesting verse, isn't it? There's been a lot of talk over this verse. There's been a lot of things suggested by this verse. Basically, what is this verse saying? If you were to put it into your own words, what is the thrust of Hebrews 13, verse 2?
I always think about Abraham.
Yeah.
The angels that
Genesis 18. Yeah.
For us here at Eastside, we need to make sure if we have visitors walk through that front door that we greet them and tell them we're glad.
So what's the word for that? Hospitality, being hospitable. And so, yes, you're exactly right. When we have people come into our assemblies, we need to be hospitable. This is our house, right? We call it God's house. This is where we meet. And when we open these doors up to the people of the community, they need to come into a warm welcome. It shouldn't be cliquish.
we need to be hospitable with our homes.
Yes, absolutely.
People into our homes.
We do. We do need to do that. Absolutely. And that's really what he's driving at. When he says here, be not forgetful to entertain strangers. He's not talking about brethren. He's talking about people who are not of our number. That's what a stranger is. And so we need to be hospitable to people that we do not know. And then he reaches back into two mainly Old Testament situations where people were unawares in the company of angels and were hospitable to them. Abraham in Genesis 18, Lot in Genesis 19. Lot had angels come into his house, didn't he? He was hospitable to them. What were the people trying to do? They were trying to, yeah. They were wanting to be very gross with them, and they wanted to know them in a
Place was, that, how promiscuous everything, like, here's some new people to town,
Yeah.
and that was the rage,
And they came and gathered at the door. They were demanding him, send them out here. And so that's horrible. And Lot was hospitable to them. And he says that some have entertained angels unaware. Now I am not of the persuasion that in the Christian dispensation that we are living in today, that we will unaware entertain angels. Maybe in the first century, when the miraculous was still in effect. Don't know. But I think what he's driving at is hospitality. Us being hospitable no matter who we know. If an angel were around us, would we know it?
Well, I see what your point is. He's making a point there because we should act like they might be an angel.
Right?
You never know who's
person that I saw. And then almost like the Lone Ranger, I would try to touch base with that person again or see if I could be where they were, the store they worked in or whatever. And I've been mystified. It's like I don't know where that guy came from.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is you can still believe that God providentially took care of it.
Absolutely. And thank you for that illustration. That was great. That's a great illustration, and to talk about the masked man. We're commanded to be hospitable, loving people, and that's definitely within these four walls as a group of Christians, but also to the world. We talked about it some today. We are to love people. We are to be that kind of group. And so if someone doesn't see it like I do, they don't believe like I do, I need to love them. And I do. I need to make the effort to say, hey, there's differences among us. So let's go back to the Bible and let's let the Bible settle our differences, right? That's the best that we can do. But even if they reject us, they're not rejecting us. They're rejecting God. And in that, we are still commanded to love them. We're still commanded to be that kind of people. The Hebrews writer here is going to give 3 calls to remembrance. In verse 2, he says, be not forgetful. What does that in a way say? Remember, right? And so then he says, verse 3, remember them that are in bonds, as bound with them, and them which suffer adversity, as being yourselves also in the body. So here he says, remember them that are in bonds. What is he talking about? He's talking about people who are imprisoned. They're in chains. Why would these people be in chains in this context? What are they in prison for?
For being a Christian, one thing.
Yeah, that'd be one thing that they would be imprisoned for. There's several reasons. There's a host of reasons. Why do people go to jail today? For a host of reasons. And just because someone does something that is contrary to the law and finds themselves behind bars doesn't mean that they should be forgotten and thrown away like trash and should not receive the attention, affection, and love of the brethren. We should love those and remember them. And so that idea of remember, is it just the mental recognition? Oh, yeah, remember so-and-so's in jail? Is that what he's getting at?
Pay attention to them more than just see them.
Yeah, I get I kind of get the same idea as in James 1:27, pure and undefiled religion before God and the Father is just to visit the fatherless and the widow. When he says remember here, he's not just saying, oh, so-and-so's in jail. I remember they've got a 10-year sentence. No, he's saying do something for them. Try to meet their needs. Encourage them.
Just reminded of Matthew 25, Jesus talking about all this.
Yeah.
For those that did this for me, he was in prison.
And you visited me or you visited me not. We were going there and you beat me to the punch. No. We're all thinking and thinking through this material, and it's a good thing. And so I wasn't getting on to you. You're following the material well, is what I was saying. Matthew 25:36 is the text there, and also Hebrews 10:32 through 35. We just covered this not long. But Hebrews 10:32, call to remember the former days when after you were illuminated, you endured a great flight of afflictions, partly while you were made a gazing stock, both by reproaches and afflictions, and partly while you became companions of them that were so used. For you had compassion, he says, of me in my bonds, and took joyfully the spoiling of your goods. What the Hebrews writer is saying in chapter 13 is that you've already practiced this. He's saying you have remembered me and you took part of me in my bonds. You're practicing the very thing, but it's also good to be reminded of things that we should continue in, right? And that's what he's saying. He's saying, you've already done this, but continue in it. It's a good thing to do. And so he said, remember them that are in bonds as bound with them. Go ahead.
You know, sometimes people in jail, we are ashamed of those people. We're actually even sometimes afraid of them. He said, don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that, right. Be compassionate. He says, remember them as bound with them. We should try to, when he says that, as bound with them, what's the idea? It is empathy. That's the word. It's
How would I feel?
putting myself in their place. Huh?
How would I feel if I couldn't leave here? I'm visiting this guy, and I'm leaving and going out in the bright sunshine.
Yeah.
How would I feel if I'm stuck in that dark place?
Yeah, and I've been in that dark place, and it's no fun. But I was also in that dark place where a lot of brethren were sending postcards and writing, and even sending commissary goods, food, and whatnot, and making visits through the electronic means that we have to talk or video visit. And that's important. And that's very important. And it's so important that the Holy Spirit decided to talk about it and record it in the text for us.
And I think also in like being chained with them, think of their family members, such as a wife that has
Mhm.
children and her husband's away in jail. Help her throughout that time, not
Yeah.
just prison.
Yeah, you've lived it, right? Yeah, she has. He says, as being yourselves also in the body. In 1 Corinthians 12, Paul makes this, if one member suffer, all suffer with it. That's what the Hebrews writer here, it sounds a whole lot like Paul right now, don't it? I've made argument that it's not Paul, and now as we get to this ending part, it sounds a whole lot like Paul. We couldn't prove it if we were shoved in a bottle and our hair was on fire and needing our last breath to live, but this sounds a whole lot like the Apostle Paul here. But he says, as being yourselves also in the body. Verse 4, marriage is honorable in all, and the bed undefiled, but whoremongers and adulterers God will judge. He says marriage is honorable in all, and the bed undefiled. Newer age scholars have translated this, and rightly so. Marriage is to be had in honor by all, and the marriage bed is to be undefiled. Both of those translations are correct, and both of them lend to the same ending, conclusion, if you will. But marriage is to be honored. It's to be had in honor by all. Who comes to your mind when you think about marriage and it is not honored within their circles? Religiously speaking. Catholics. Marriage is to be had in honor, and the bed is undefiled, except if you're a priest. No, if you're a priest, marriage contaminates you and makes you unworthy. That's as unscriptural and ungodly a doctrine as you'll ever find. And nuns, yeah, priests and nuns. I want to have none of that doctrine, if you will. Allow me the play on words. Marriage is to be had in honor, but marriage is dishonored. In our day and age, marriage is dishonored by divorce. Marriage is dishonored by divorce, whether it's justified or not. It's still a dishonor to marriage. Marriage is dishonored by shacking up. People that move in together and live together before they are committed to one another, that is dishonored. Marriage is dishonored by adultery. Adultery is a slap in the face to the marriage bed and to God and to the spouse, to the church, to the children, to the parents. It's a huge dishonor. Marriage is dishonored by neglect, and marriage is dishonored by a redefinition.
It's so meaningful to me with Joseph that he told Potiphar's wife that this would be a sin against God. You know, it's the first time we see that concept. I cannot sin against God.
Yeah. When you think of Jacob, think about how binding the marriage contract is. That he was duped. He had the wool pulled over his eyes. And he married Leah. Who did he want? Rachel.
Leah, all it says is that she had weak eyes.
Yeah.
She may have been like me and couldn't see very good.
Yeah. But he wanted the one, and he got the other. And when he realized that he had the wool pulled over his eyes, did he back out and say, no? He honored the marriage contract. He had made a vow. He had made a promise. That's how binding it is. Even though when he woke up and he says, I don't want you, guess what? I'm married to you. We got to make it work. Marriage is honorable and all, and the bed undefiled. The marriage bed is where sexual activity, sexual fulfillment is allowed. It's not allowed in any other place. Is sex right or wrong? It's right. In marriage, it's right. And not in marriage, it's wrong. The marriage bed is to be undefiled. He says here, but whoremongers and adulterers, God will judge. Let your conversation be without covetousness, and be content with such things as you have. For he has said, I will never leave thee, nor forsake thee. So here we see Paul is, or the Hebrews writer, excuse my slip of the tongue there, is getting to the fact that you shouldn't have nice things. And that you should just give everything away to the poor. Is that what he's getting at? No, he's not. He is not saying that Christians can't have nice things. And yeah, it's the love of money. It's the coveting. It is putting things before Christ. What he's driving at really is putting our confidence in God and not in stuff. He said, let your conversation, your manner of life, be without covetousness. We can have all kinds of nice things that we work hard for, that we save up for, that we invest in, that we pay our bills and one day we'll own, and that's good and that's right. What's not good and what's not right is if we put those things before God and we trust in our stuff and not in the living God. The rich young ruler was not condemned because he had a lot of stuff and that he was rich. He was not condemned because he was a ruler. He was condemned because he chose all of that stuff over Jesus. And that's the problem. We can have nice things. We can be rich. If God so allows and we work and apply ourselves, nothing wrong with it. Now, there is a temptation and a snare that the Bible talks about with those who are well-to-do. But we are to be mindful of our confidence in God. For I will never leave thee, he has said, nor forsake thee. So that we may boldly say, my stuff is my helper. No, the Lord is my helper. And that's the mindset that we are to have. It's not all my fancy houses and cars and this and that and the other. It's the Lord. And when the Lord blesses me with nice homes and nice vehicles and nice stuff, we can have all the stuff that God blesses us with as long as we keep God in his rightful place. Amen? We've just got to keep God where he belongs on the throne. And we've got to use our stuff and love people instead of using people and loving stuff. That's the main difference. He said, remember, the third call to remembrance, them which have the rule over you. which have spoken unto you the word of God, whose faith follow, considering the end of their conversation. We are out of time. I've gone a minute over. We started late. We'll pick up in verse 7 because I want to talk about this. Even though we have preached a sermon on elders, it's always good to consider what God has to say in each verse. I love you and thank you for your attention.